Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to this conference entitled Charity and Science, the Mystery of the Relationship of Cure. This conference is not designed exclusively for experts. Because there is an emergency, there is a strong need for human needs. And when people experience sufferings, we're all involved, regardless of our creed and profession. Why have we decided to put this title? It is that the natural structure of man is something like that is leaning towards the other. When somebody feels that there is a need, then for the first time in a modern time, there is a risk. That person risks to live and experience separately this natural instinct pushing us towards the other and the operational attempt to do something. This is all the more true in our world, where there's men and women that specifically decided to devote their lives to care for the others. That is why today's conference is not meant to be a theoretical reflection on charity and science. Rather, it will be a conference with witnesses who will tell us about their own experience and how this challenge, this reality is faced. So without further ado, I would like to introduce the panelists that accepted this really, really hard task, that is to expose themselves about their experience. And I will start with the person who comes from the fastest location, that is Professor Mariani, who is a friend of ours. He works at the Mayo Clinic and is in charge of the Department of Obstetrics and Gynecology. He is fully involved in this kind of challenge. Next, there's Professor Roberto Bernabei, who is an academic, and he works at the Gemelli Polyclinic, Gemelli Hospital. He's a geriatric and president of the Italia Longeva Foundation. And he also has so many roles that we don't have the time to summarize now. But above all, he is a person that on a daily basis has to do with patients that are affected by diseases that apparently do not have a therapy, a treatment. Then we have Dr. Mariella Enoc. You may know her. She is president of the Bambino Gesù Pediatric Hospital. She has been member of the governing board of the same hospital. She has had and still has big responsibilities, not directly in clinical activities, but in making it possible, in making it accessible to the highest number of children. You know that the Bambino Gesù Hospital is a central reference for many diseases, and we are very grateful to her for being here with us today. And then, though she does not really need an introduction, we have Rose, who is a nurse and is in charge of Meeting Point International of Kampala, Uganda. She is president of that meeting point, and she has been involved for many years in taking care of patients and their families, and also in very important educational activities open to the children of the patients. And we extend our greetings to all these people. We are a little bit late, so we have to catch up with our schedule, and let's try to stick to the allotted time, and I give the floor to Professor Mariani. Thank you very much. I have a PowerPoint presentation. First of all, I would like to say thank you. Thank you to the meeting of Rimini, and especially Dr. Felice Achilli, Dario Maggioni, and Giulio Mari, who invited me here and are accompanying me in this path. Yes, because this is a story of a personal conversion. This is a path in which I have encountered many people taking me along this way. I am very grateful to all of them. They are friends who helped me to assess what happened in my life and to prepare this work. Thank you. And particularly, I would like to thank my family, Raffaella and my 4 children, Letizia, Pietro, Giovanni, and Giacomo. I was asked to talk about charity and science and their relationship therein. What do we mean by charity here is to look at the patient as a person, and then there is a science as a medical technique and as research. Without science, I can accompany a patient, but I cannot cure a patient. Obviously, if I can't do my job well, I can't cure anybody. On the other hand, when science forgets about patients, as our friend Achilli told us, science loses out. So, in medicine, charity and science go together. They are in a mutual relationship, but how can they be united in our job? I am a surgeon and I work at the Mayo Clinic. The Mayo Clinic is a big American hospital, one of the best ones, and one of the most important hospitals in the United States. It is based on an important principle. Medicine is based on 3 elements, 3 united shields: the cure of the patient, research or science, and education. As you can see, even according to Mayo Clinic, science and patient care go together. The need of the patient is at the center of everything and must lead the hospital and research. This is me doing my job. I do robotic surgery. I enter the theater, and the patient normally is asleep. So there is a detachment. I do not have a direct contact with the patient. This is what I see. I see bowels. I see organs. You can understand how easy it is to separate technical aspect from the face of the patient. That is the performance from its aim. It is easy to work without thinking that I have a person in front of me in that moment. What is it that make me go beyond the bowels themselves and think that it is a mechanical act? And how was it that I ended up being a surgeon in Minnesota, in Rochester? So to answer all these questions, I'm going to tell you about my story. So first of all, what was the reason why I started to deal with charity and science, to cure patients and to be a surgeon and a researcher? After graduating in medicine, I came across my first maestros, Mario Maggioni, who taught me how to stitch, and another colleague that taught me made me realize that what I was doing was not enough. I had to learn something more for the patients, to learn more about surgery. So in November 1996, I had the opportunity to travel to the US and to go to the Mayo Clinic in Minnesota. It was not easy to move to another country. Just like a migrant, there is difficulties with the language, with the culture diversities. I was away from my family. I was broke. And then Rochester is really cold. It's snowing almost all the time of the year. I didn't have the money to buy a car at that time, and my friend, the father of my friend Jerry, gave me a bicycle to cycle to work. But why did I make all these efforts? They make all these efforts. I studied so much, taking so many exams in Italy first, and then in the United States. I spent so much money. I've been away from my family, my wife, my children. Why? I remember when I first entered the operating theater at the Mayo Clinic, and I saw that young Dr. Peter Lean performing an important surgery, lymphadenectomy. In Italy, only the best doctors were performing that. He was really good, and he was as young as me. I remember that feeling of beauty, perfection, harmony in that surgery. In that moment, I had the perception that there was something for me. There was something for my life. I got there with a desire to be able to cure my patients in an adequate way. And there I did found a place and colleagues where the answer seemed to be there. There was a promise of response to my desire. Patient care was linked to a technique to be learned, and I didn't have to have any fear of knowing more about it. Then, at the Mayo Clinic, I came across another master, and he gave me a job, and I followed him. I worked there for a year with him. At the end of that year, I was ready to go back to Italy. I remember that I hadn't published anything. I just collected data. I went to his office and said, as a typical Italian man, here are the data I collected. I haven't published anything. Give them to somebody who may use them. Give them to some of your students. I'm going back home. The experience here was great, but now it's over. I remember that he said, no, these data are your data. You did a good job. I want you to be the one that publishes them. You're worth it. I'm worth it? Was he talking to me? That's how I was able to pay for the flight tickets to go back and work together with him. He welcomed me. He welcomed me in his house, and he gave me a lot of time. So it is important to find a maestro, a person that can help us and take us, somebody that sees some value and a potential in us that we are not aware of. Nobody had looked at me in that way in my job, and that's how I started to work. He told me that with surgery I could cure a patient at a time, but with science I could cure many, many more people. So that's how I understood that patient care was also linked to science, to research well done, not just through surgery. Following his suggestion, together we made history in the uterus cancer care at Mayo Clinic. I worked so hard and we published many, many works. In a short time, I became an expert in the uterine tumor, and I was traveling around the world to talk about it. Why did I do that? Because it was curiosity for sure, to know new things, a desire to create something bigger, an ambition, but above all, there was a heart full of gratitude for the way I had been looked at and for everything that I received. And this gratitude, it was this gratitude that pushed me to do research. Now I work at the Mayo Clinic, which is a very favorable setting to help us understand that the aim of our job is the patient. However, I also understood that even the best setting does not always help. There is career desires, productivity, publications, grants. There's colleagues that are not always helpful. We all know about it. The setting can be favorable, just Mayo Clinic is in the majority of cases, but sometimes this does not help. And then, over time, life gives us a challenge. Over time, even the most generous and grateful heart gets tired, gets used to the situation. The heart alone is not enough. Sometimes even the face of the patient is not enough. It pales away. All the nurses and the doctors that have been working for years know about it. Generosity is not totally faithful. So what is it that can help us maintain this faithfulness, maintain this interest in charity and science, and to maintain a relationship of cure and not seeing just the bowels? We've seen that desire and gratitude is not enough. The setting is not enough. Even the face of the patient is not always enough. What is needed is that the man is not left alone. To be able to sustain this sight over the ill, over the patient, a friend is needed. So we have started to travel to find friends and to ask for help. These friends supported us and helped us to rebirth again. And this made me desire even more to find friends like these even in my workplace. So looking backward, I realized that there were many other faces that accompanied me during my professional career. There are so many faces, so many people, but there is a particular story that I would like to share. This is the story of a friend who helped me do science for patients, to look for the good and to keep together charity and science. This is Professor Nadine Abrustum. I study uterine cancer and the lymph nodes that are glands. To understand if there is metastasis, traditionally what we do is that we take off all the lymph nodes in that area with a very long intervention called lymphadenectomy. The sentinel lymph nodes are those lymph nodes where cancer develops first. If we take them away, the intervention is shorter, more precise, and with fewer complications. With the Mayo Clinic and my master, I studied and supported for many years the importance of this kind of intervention in uterine tumor, and we became famous for those studies. Then I met Nadim for the first time in Japan at a conference. We should have been enemies according to competition logics. We're from two different institutions. We had a debate. I was supporting lymphadenectomy, and he was presenting this new idea of the sentinel lymph node. When Nadim and I met, we acknowledged that we were sharing something. We were linked by the interest in finding about the truth. At that time, I was not really interested in the research I was doing at the Mayo Clinic. I was really wondering whether what we were doing was right. And I spent some time with Nadine, and we made friends. Initially, I didn't believe in what he said, but then I became more interested, and our friendship favored this desire for knowledge and helped us to work together. We decided to compare the data of our institutions. So at the Mayo Clinic, I put to the test what we had been doing for many years, and we found out that he was right, that the sentinel lymph nodes were working. We published the data with 2 papers, and 2 more are forthcoming. And then we wrote together some guidelines in an international prospective study that is about to begin. In my division at the Mayo Clinic, it was really hard, and I came across so many difficulties because we had to change things that we were used to do for many years and for which we also had become quite famous. I invited Nadim to the meeting. However, he can't be here, but he gave me a video which is how he would like to be with us. When you watch this video, you may think that this is against logic. Maybe he may be an enemy, a competitor, because what he says is that his main reason is the quest for truth and friendship, something new that he discovered.
I think it's really a profound story, and I think we should share it more and more, Andrea, because it really is a very good example of how we can work without our personal egos. I don't think you and I have done anything in this scientific endeavor that we did trying to promote ourselves. I think it's always been for the greater good, for trying to get to the truth, and for trying to make things better. We were just trying to really understand the truth about this and how that to me was the biggest reward. So my advice to anybody younger than us who's going through something similar is find your friends, find people who you can go on the journey with. I wish we had met 20 years ago, you and I, but it is what it is, and I'm glad that we are friends now. But one thing that I would do differently if I could rewind around 25 or 30 is I would try to find friends that would go on the journey with me. People didn't tell me this. Nobody opened my eyes to this, but if I give advice now to young physicians who are working in an area like we do, young scientists, people who will go through suffering and challenges like we do, I would strongly encourage them to work hard to find real friends and colleagues who will go on the journey with them. It will make the journey a lot more pleasant and probably a lot more successful.
La nostra storia parla di scienza.
Our story talks about science by means of friendship, a friendship that helped science to remain charity, to remain based on the truth. It is more efficient and it is better for everybody to follow this path. And now I bring with me all the faces of the friends that accompany me along this journey. I was working over the weekend 3 weeks ago. When you are on duty over the weekend, there's so many patients to see, and the majority of them are patients that are cared by other colleagues. And the rule is to be fast, not to spend too much time talking to them, otherwise you never finish. So I got to a room of a colleague's patient who had a simple operation. She didn't have cancer and she was ready to be discharged. There was no reason to be sad. So we have a quick chat about the operation that was successful and try to get out of the room as fast as possible. But when I'm about to leave the room, I look at her in her face and I see some sadness in her face. For a moment, I think I may ignore that sadness. There's no time. I have to run and see the other 30 patients. But then I think about the faces of the friends, all the good that I received, all the love that I get from them. I can't betray all of this. So I stopped and I asked, why are you unhappy? Why are you sad? The intervention is successful. You don't have a cancer. There's no reason why you should be sad. So I understood that that woman had a disabled son at home who needed constant assistance 24 hours a day, and she was the only caregiver. So she was worried about how she could have cared for her child after the intervention. After that, my view of her changed totally. This patient was in need. She was a worried mother for the son that he was loving, and she was regaining a face, and we provided a better assistance considering the wider context. The memory of the friends is the antidote of the patient seen just as a body. It is something to which we belong, and that gives us a different view over the patients. Thank you.
Parlare per primi è difficile.
Well, it's always hard to break the ice, but sometimes even talking after the first speaker is not easy at all. Thank you very much. And now the floor goes to the next speaker. Well, he said so many interesting and true things, and you can see that, well, being generous to a colleague is something that is not that easy. It's not that easy, it's true, because sometimes our world really risks to drift away from that. And what he told us is a real story. And the important thing is to be true and to be faithful to oneself and to be generous, even if it's not always very easy. Well, on my way here, I came across so many young people. So I would really like to be very down to earth when it comes to charity. And science is necessary today. Medicine today is based on evidence. People talk about evidence-based medicine. So if I give you some advice or a pill, is that because there is specific evidence telling us that this is the thing to be done. So this is a starting point. And then I will talk about charity in a second, but well, we're talking here also about the care relationship, so the relationship between the physician and the patient. Well, let's go back in time, and actually this relationship is about silence, because in the past there used to be somebody talking and prescribing and giving orders, and another one listening and considering those orders as very important. Maybe some people read the novel by Croning, telling the story of a physician of the 1900s who was known to be good and was like an outsider and considered as unusual, peculiar, but simply because he was doing something that today is considered as fundamental and crucial in the cure relationship, because it's a two-way relationship today. Well, so that relationship evolved over time, and if you think about it, today, anybody seeing a doctor or going to a hospital has to sign the informed consent. The informed consent should have marked a major step ahead, because everything should be in there about what is about to be done. But actually, that kind of informed consent includes information that is rather neutral, and let's say that it is more like a waiver, so that if something goes wrong, nobody can be held accountable for that. And sometimes there's so much information in that paper, so much, maybe too much sometimes, and sometimes it goes against the interest of the patient, or it's too rich. Well, I remember that in the 80s, well, this practice was at the very beginning in Italy, but was very common in the US. And I had a sister who had to have a bone marrow transplant. She had leukemia, and so that's why we traveled to Seattle with my sister to have the procedure. And well, the hospital where she was hospitalized had the informed consent among its procedures, and these informed consent described the detailed procedures, so drugs, pills, examination procedures, and among other things, there was also these specifications. So there is a 50% possibility of you as a patient to die. Well, fortunately, my sister did not speak a word of English, and I sort of was her interpreter. And as a good Italian, I told her, well, there are a few risks as in the case of any other medical procedure. And if you think about it, this is what is still somehow sort of supporting us today when it comes to sort of the physician-patient relationship, because the informed consent has a sort of a legal aspect, but we doctors, we try to be not so aggressive and try to sort of make communication smoother and better communicate and convey the sort of different issues relating to a specific pathology. And then, of course, it could also be a personal issue. I mean, there are people who want full sort of clarity, others that sort of needs to be supported much more. And we are rich in common sense and humanity, because this is also somehow the only way out of such a harsh reality. Because if you tell a patient, oh, you will certainly die because this pathology is lethal, well, then that patient can't remain in sort of still and not say anything. So sometimes leaving some room for hope is positive in both ways, and also makes the patient feel a bit less the burden of what he's going through. But there are some news in this relationship. Well, basically there are three main new elements when it comes to this relationship. First of all, in 2014, so not many years ago, a new sort of ethic code for physicians has been written down. And for the very first time, it is clearly stated that, even any sort of communication timing is part of the time devoted to the therapy and the treatment. So, communication is also part of the treatment of the cure. So each physician has the duty to communicate as soon as possible. So communication is considered as a very important aspect of this relationship between the physician and the patient. And then we have today the so-called 4P medicine: personalized, predictive, preventive, and participatory. So these are four words that somehow indicate one crucial thing. What? Well, simply that there is a participation, there is a relationship to the patient, but at the end of the day, this is necessary, because when it comes to personalized medicine, it's not the patient, the person that matters, but the sort of genetic code and the genes, because if the receptors expressed by the genes are of one kind or of another kind, a specific therapy can be more or less effective. So actually, this is not really personalized. It's extremely technological. It's a very high-tech approach. So sometimes you have the feeling that you make one sort of step ahead and two steps backwards. But actually, all that is forcing us already today, and will force us more and more in the future, to better cope with the problem of aging? Well, to me, this is a professional issue because I deal with old people every day, and there is a real boom when it comes to the elderly, and this is really radically changing the rules of the game. Because when it comes to this country, but this is also the case maybe of the mother who wanted to go home as soon as possible because she had a disabled child. And today we have 5 million all disabled, and by 2030 they will become 8. So very, very soon. And we have also so many lonely people over 65 years of age, and out of them 3 million are women, and they are 4 million and 3 million are women, and they suffer from something very, very deep. Because if you are cancer, if you have cancer, if you have specific pathologies, you can have good answers. And also, well, in that case, the physician-patient relationship is much clearer and much better defined. But actually, if we consider these impressive number of elderly, you have sometimes several combined pathologies. You can have diabetes, cancer, maybe arthritis, so several things together that are not supported by theoretical evidence, because evidence-based medicine works very well for just one pathology at a time. But today we have to deal with multifaceted sort of medical pictures. So people suffering from several diseases at the same time. So if a person suffers from 5 or 6 diseases at the same time, it's not easy to treat them. And so you understand that, well, no therapy works, and then also the physician-patient relationship suffers from that. So not only the physician has to deal with 4 or 5 diseases at the same time, but also have to deal with the dysfunctioning that these combined picture provokes. And that means establishing a much stronger relationship, because when it comes to the lack of function brought about by those diseases should be somehow sort of offset by the drugs or the pills. So if a person has a specific mobility problem, well, you need to compensate for that. So I need to do science and charity at the same time. I need to do what is needed. I need to do what is best for the patient. And this sort of forces us to face brand new problems. Think about Alzheimer's disease. We have more than 1 million people suffering from Alzheimer's disease in Italy today. And unfortunately, there is no therapy for such a disease. So the biggest risk is to reach 90 years of age, but half of those people reaching 90 years of age risk to suffer from Alzheimer's disease. So I really want to raise a couple of issues, and then I will shut up. And we need to get ready to face this battle. I'll tell you why. First of all, 2 amongst the most important pharmaceutical companies said, okay, we draw back. It's too expensive to make research in Alzheimer's disease. Oh, wonderful to know. So profits are now reinvested in this. So just to give an idea of the rigorous rationale of capitalism and liberalism that somehow clashes with therapies and the need for therapies. But also you will see, oddly enough, to what extent those who are asking for embryo and stem cells therapies to treat Alzheimer's disease and sort of are open to any kind of solution, to find a solution in order to find a therapy. And of course, let's leave behind the issue how embryos are going to be treated in this context. And then maybe these people will tell you tomorrow, oh, these people are so suffering that maybe it is much better to opt for calm and smoothless euthanasia because that person suffers so much, there is no cure. But so let's be careful because this sounds terrible, it's very dangerous, and probably these kinds of attitudes will grow and will be very tempting and attractive to some people, but we strongly oppose this kind of attitude. So we need to be extra vigilant and extra careful. So on the one hand, this means that we need to accompany and support our sort of fellow individuals, but also I would like to share with you another idea. I have just one picture to show you, and I think that this is about the most interesting thing we have done in our department, that is sort of department dealing with geriatrics and with the elderly. And over the last few years, and I really want to show you this picture. So over the last few years, we have started following people with Down syndrome. Down syndrome also brings about a form of early aging. I don't know if it's right or wrong if geriatric specialists follow these cases. And again, the oldest patient is 64 years old, which is quite incredible. But this is just to show you what you can do and how much good you can do, even through little things. And following these 400 people suffering from Down syndrome, let us better than cope with our elderly and manage them in the best possible way, because on the one hand, we were able to understand many things, and secondly, we were able also to somehow anticipate the needs of our oldest patients. So we could then provide high quality medical services, even though it's not that easy to follow these patients. And we were able instead to keep working on research. And again, doing things normally is not just a honesty and generosity deed, but it is more about some mutual help that we can provide each other. Thank you very much. Before giving the floor to Mariella Enoc, I would like to underscore these very important aspects. It is the following. Well, human suffering and pain are quite sort of upsetting and hard to cope with. But on the other hand, we have to cope with that and to try to go beyond what has already been set forth and coded. And the major energy source that we need for such a relationship is a part of something that is going to be the main subject of the speech of Mrs. Enoc, because certainly she is sort of working for a hospital that plays a key role when it comes to pediatrics, so I'm sure that she will help us better understand this problem. Thank you.
Yeah, prima volta al meeting.
Thank you. It is the first time I attend a meeting.
E sono venuta.
And I'm here for a number of reasons. First of all, In my long experience in the healthcare world, I have met so many people that belong to your movement, and I have come across these people in very nice occasions and experiences. The second reason is about the subject I was asked to address. This subject basically has been at the center of all my life. I decided that I wanted to be a doctor in Africa, but then I understood that this was not possible, so I didn't like this idea of being a doctor, so I decided to deal with healthcare as a manager. It was a strange choice at that time, a woman working in this way, but I believe that the setting, as my colleague mentioned before, was indispensable to have some actions that were needed, actions of care. The setting, the container, would be empty of ethical principles, without aims, that does not know where to go, just moving at the spur of the moment is not a good setting, is not a good container. Even if I was working in for-profit organizations and quite renowned organizations, but I was going to stick to this principle. Those who wanted me had to accept me as I was. Otherwise, I would not accept. And this idea also led me to another experience, because I thought that there were many hospitals belonging to the so-called Catholic hospitals, Catholic healthcare, that were going to enter crisis. They were not able to maintain their charity principle that inspired the founders. There were bad management and inability to design the future, to maintain the links with the past, losing ideals. So that's how I entertained myself in this job. And one of these hospitals, a hospital of Altucci di Como, who we have Dr. Figeni here, and I keep following that hospital in an adventurous way, if you want, but they bear with me. So at that point, I thought, well, I now can change my life and do what I wanted to do. And I had this strange call in Rome, to which I reacted. I said many no's, because at that time I was not able, as I used to do during the rest of my life, to put myself in the hands of the Lord. I said, no, it is not possible to ask me more. I had to be free. But as you know, the Lord is much stronger. So at a certain stage, I did accept it. I didn't know about the Bambino Gesù hospital. I had always been involved in hospitals caring for adult patients or elderly patients, but I had no clue of what a pediatric hospital was about. I didn't even know where it was. I am from the north of the country, so I was not really aware of where this hospital was located. So I got there by myself. I didn't really know what to expect, and for a couple of months, I was not really able to get in love with this hospital. And then something changed. In the evening, instead of spending time in my office, I started to meet families and children patients, and this changed my view, changed my life. Today, I'm in deep love with this hospital. I've been working there for 3 years. It is today known as the first pediatric hospital in Europe. It is open to the world. And as a hospital, I can say that truly science goes hand in hand with cure. So this experience is really overwhelming me. I devote all my time, and all the rest of my days will be there So this has become an experience that has made me understand what the mystery of the relationship, of the care relationship is about. This mystery is, first of all, a sight, stopping to understand much better. Many words can be spoken, but if there is no silence first, if one is not quiet first, if one does not enter the mystery of human pain, then words are just words. So I stopped. And I began to work so that this kind of hospital was not just an enterprise, but it had to be a community with many meetings and with a lot of very good collaborators. I want to thank them all, and I am succeeding in this. We get on pretty well now. Well, there's still some friction from time to time, but still we understood little by little that first and foremost we have to stop and look around. That's what Andrea said before. First there's friendship, and then there's career ambitions, and then there's, well, I am much better than the others. There is a passage here that really surprised me that I would like to share. Daniele Mincarelli came to work with us at a certain stage. He worked in a cooperative and he was cleaning the hospital. Today he is a writer, an author for Rai Communication, and he wrote a book called The House of Sight, and he wrote, "When I leave, I walk in front of a room full of children, and there's something that attracts me, and I have to stop. It is all the crowd there with the children and the parents. There's so many of them. Children, 5, 6 years, up to 12 years of age, they all share something as soldiers in the same army. They are, almost all of them are bald, they have something to cover their mouth, they're thin. I try to count them, then I stop. Then I look at a mother, a young girl who at another time, in another world, I would have stopped and tried to flatter. I have to try and make all of this normality. I have to convince myself, but I can't make it. Everything belongs to me, and I belong to everything. That's what the heart tells me, a heart that is crushed by this awaited multitude. And this is a person who was working as a cleaning person in the hospital. What does that mean? In any kind of job in a hospital, the important thing is the sight, is looking at the other people, is the contemplation of the mystery that everyone can do as they can. But just moving one's hands or typing on a computer keyboard is not enough. Disease always requires a fundamental step, and it is the second sight, an internal sight. Disease, whether it is affecting an adult or an elderly or a child patient, is a threshold towards a new existential awareness. This is what we learn from our little patients every single day. Last year, on Rai 3 television, there was a TV program about these children patients, and one of our children said, "The evil must be fought and won. It does not depend on the professionalism of doctors and on how good the hospital is. It what depends on me, the welcome of a smile, friendship hands." We have to understand that disease is a mirror that forces us to look into ourselves, to know more ourselves, and also to let us be helped by the others. And I think that this is one of the most critical steps in our lives, especially for all of us who have always been sitting on this side of the table, that have never been on the other side. This is what we learn from the little patients, from the elderly patients, that is the need to be helped by the others. Because even children sometimes have to leave their mom's hand and have to follow the nurse or the doctor. And they have to go through a journey they have never thought about, and they have to trust in the others. But if they believe in that, they can do it. Looking at children and little kids can help us understand our own limits and also the uniqueness of what we have. Looking at suffering can reveal the mystery. And here is where the project of relationship emerges. This is a revelation emerging from an encounter. And the relationship is not just based on willingness. It is a revelation emerging from an encounter, emerging from empathy. We can teach all the doctors and all the nurses how they should communicate, but first and foremost, we have to help them go through an inner journey in which whatever their creed, whatever their belief, they have to understand what it means to establish a relationship with the other. Pope Francis in the Evangelium Gaudium says, knowing with certainty that those who suffer give himself to love, it will flourish. And such a flourishing sometimes is invisible, it is unreachable, it cannot be counted. The roots of the reactions draw on the mystery of the suffering on life and tells us that flourishing is present in a relationship that is able to welcome, to listen, and also to be quiet in proximity. A relationship that aims to heal, but above all, that includes the people in the care. And I've learned a lot about this from Pope Francis. Every time that the Pope visits the hospital to come and see the little children, his encounter is a quiet encounter. There is great empathy. There is great communication in the eyes, in the heart. On the 5th of January, I invited the Pope in Palidoro. We spent 3 hours together to meet the kids and the families, and I think he spoke about 20 words. Sometimes in his eyes I could read the words, how much suffering, how much suffering. And then he would also relax, just playing a joke. And then he continued to be quiet, to be silent. He never mentioned the words that one would expect from a priest or from a pope. Oh, come on, be strong, you will improve. He never mentioned these words. He was communicating with silence, by listening, by sharing the deep sorrow, the deep pain. And before the question, but why do children suffer? You know, he only has one answer. He says, I have no answer. I only know that the Father allowed for his Son to be on the cross. And that's what Pope Francis is teaching us with his different way of established relationships. But I can assure you that this way is truly filled with empathy and humanity. Another encounter was celebrated on the 19th of April last year, and on that occasion he said, Child Jesus grew up so much, he became a family, and the child is ill, and we found a family for him because the child Jesus is a testimony, a human testimony, and a Catholic hospital, to be Catholic, first has to be humane, and you are giving a humane testimony today. So first of all, it is this humanity, this true humanity that in the beautiful exhibition about job, you have succeeded to illustrate so well. And the encounter is at the center here. It's not the question, it's not the quest, it's the encounter. We are doing this a lot. Of course, the parents ask questions, they want to know. They get answers, but they also know that in many moments, there is a lot of love surrounding them. There is a lot of care. There is a lot of passion so that their children can heal. But at the basis of all this, there is the greatest charity. As a great surgeon mentioned that you remember in an exhibition, the first form of charity is science, such as Rosmini said that the highest form of charity is politics. We probably forgot about these things. So science, scientific research should always be given priority. I suffer a lot when I visit so-called Catholic hospitals and I find obsolete machines and I don't understand what I'm going to see. And what about this? Is this good healthcare? Is this charity? Come on. Not at all. This is just some attempt to do things, but in a worn-out way. I think that any of us stealing even just a small amount of money to research, to healthcare, to permitting care, to permitting progress, and permitting hope, well, this is a huge, huge bad thing, because we are stealing hope, we are stealing future. And this science is not just for us. This is not just for the scientists or for the young researchers who make so many efforts to find something. It's for everybody. That is why I wanted the Bambino Gesù hospital not to just give some resources to other countries. I wanted this hospital to donate its knowledge. Many countries in the world, advanced countries such as China and Russia, or poor countries in Central Africa or in this moment Syria and other countries, our doctors go to educate young doctors, to train local doctors, and to bring what we, thanks to the resources that we have and thanks to the skills that these people have managed to achieve. Science is not a possession, is not owned. It's not that those who make a discovery can be just proud of it because they will receive an award. This is something to be shared. It is a journey. It is a good that must be shared because it belongs to humanity. And I believe more and more in the fact that science needs human resources and a lot of economic resources. That's why nothing should be wasted. Not even 1 cent must be thrown away, but this passion can make it possible that science and charity be united. And as Bepeghi said, that hope is walking in front of them, because this is what men really want.
Mi fate voglia di venire un'altra volta.
Well, now I want to come even next year. Now, Rose, you have the floor. I want to say something. Personally, I see really this as a kind of evidence of how a Christian encounter instead of providing a quick and fast answer to the problem of men's suffering, can really make it clear and can help us perceive it so clearly.
Saluto a tutti.
Ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. My Italian is far from perfect, but I'll try to speak Italian. I'll do my best. Charity, science is what makes men happy. Well, men is at stake here, as usual. And as usual, when it comes to human beings, we should always start anything from ourselves. At the beginning, I thought that this approach was a rather selfish one, but actually the truth is that you cannot give away what you do not possess. So, who am I? Who are these men I have to heal? It's not enough to analyze the matter of existence. And even instinctive reactions are not suitable because that is not a way out from confusion. This is not something that will let us sort of express our true self. And sometimes analysis and research work seem to be endless. Sometimes there are so many problems that seem to be hard to overcome. And sometimes it's very hard to have a sort of down-to-earth view of things. Allow me to quote a great Italian poet, Giacomo Leopardi, who used to write, "No one thing shows the greatness and power of the human intellect, or the loftiness and nobility of man, more than his ability to know and to understand fully and feel strongly his own smallness, when, in considering the multiplicity of worlds, he feels himself to be an infinitesimal part of a globe, which itself is a negligible part of one of the infinite number of systems that go to make up the world. And in considering this, is astonished by his own smallness, and in feeling it deeply and regarding it intently, virtually blends into nothing. And it is as if he loses himself in the immensity of things, and find himself as though lost in the incomprehensible vastness of existence. With this single act of thought, he gives the greatest possible proof of the nobility and immense capability of his own mind, which, enclosed in such a small and negligible being, has nonetheless managed to know and understand things so superior to his own nature, and to embrace and contain the same intensity of existence and things in his thought. Well, I was struck by this, and I asked myself, which is the nature of human beings? What can make people happy? I started working with enthusiasm. I really wanted to help everybody heal. I work with AIDS patients and their relatives in the poor districts of Kampala city, which is the capital of Uganda. And I tried to gather all the possible knowledge and at the same time to gather all the possible devices and equipment and tools. And I thought that this could be enough. For instance, I carried out data sheets to mark down the specific timings of the drug intake or for antiretroviral therapies. And usually, well, these people were quite good at filling in the forms, but then the tablets were chunked out. And the food was sold to buy alcohol or other things. And the boys that I tried to send to school preferred to hang around in the street, or maybe just sort of look for things in the waste bins, or try to find things to be sold. So those who I believed were my friends are the ones that made me suffer the most. At one point, I wanted to go on a desert island, maybe with some animals, but no people around. Every day I saw people dying or people disappointing me. And everything I had expected was not coming true. So I was deeply disappointed, and I sort of went through a crisis. But then Don Giussani let me thought about who I am and what is man. Man is about relationship, and people can find out about their nature only through relationships. So Don Giussani revealed to me who I am and who are the men I have to heal. So somehow he set the content and methodology of my work. In other words, to communicate to everybody the greatness, value, and dignity of every individual. That's how we launched the International Meeting Point. In the beginning, it was called Meeting Point Kampala, but then we called it Meeting Point International, just to underscore the fact that the heart of man is an international one. And also, we wanted to clearly state that people should be considered and treated as a whole. And I embarked on this journey with AIDS patients, orphans, poor people, mad people. And so it is important to make him understand that they are much bigger than, their life. And so we try to work on the education of these people. And we consider education as the best possible tool to let these people rediscover themselves. The methodology we use is very helpful to make things go on and to go beyond what appears, trying to find a match between the reality of the world and one's own self, trying to sort of discover the essence of each individual. I started living and working when somebody told me, "You are mine." Don Giussani did not know me, but it was evident that I was nothing. But I felt loved and I felt wanted, as if his gaze could tell me, "I want to be with you because you have such a great value, such an endless value." And everything resulted from that gaze. I defined that it was not sort of defined by my own defects. And so that gaze started to shape me like a light that sort of sheds light, and everything. For me, it was like a revelation And so I've started to feel a sort of attraction and affection towards my life and other people's life. I started living and working when I sort of became aware of the meaning of the following question: who am I? Well, I started to live and work when I found an answer to this question. And also I found specific faces and names that under that question. So that's when I was set free. And so my freedom resulted from a sense of belonging, from having relationships, because then you can feel free. And you feel so free that you can face any kind of reality. You can face anything because you know who you are. You know whom you belong to. And so you do not expect anything from the others. You do not in anything from the others because you already have what you need. I felt big, free. I felt as the heart of my own reality because Don Giussani revealed to me who I am. For instance, I remember when I met in person Don Giussani, and I remember that I complained about my poverty, my inability, the fact of being nothing. And so I talked about all my sins. And I remember that he looked at me, held my hands, and told me, Rose, don't you know if you were the last person on earth, God would have come anyway? God actually has come for you because God doesn't necessarily come for a group of people, because in the eyes of the Lord, each individual is unique, like a single child. He came for you, he died for you, so that your nothingness won't be lost. And to me, that was something completely new and different, a new world. He didn't tell me that I had something important. No, not at all. He said that my nothingness was important. And then Benedetto, a friend of mine, Pope Benedict, I consider him like a friend, because his words, like Don Giussani's words, seem to overlap perfectly. And he talks about the love of God in Caritas Est, Deus Caritas Est. He talks about God's love as a form of madness somehow. And that shocked me, because what I used to think about myself and the others, about eating, sleeping, drinking, laughing, crying, well, everything changed in my eyes. My gaze changed. You cannot understand to what extent everything changed and got so much more value. Don Giussani revealed to me that God did for me much more than necessary. So he sort of gave himself to me as a gift, totally, entirely, completely. Charity to me is exactly this, is God that comes to me as a form of divine madness, because you react in a specific way, because you feel this origin vibrating once again in your guts. It resonates. So without this sort of charity lived in the moment, none of us could exist. God donated himself to us in order to let us be happy. And I will now read a quote by Pope Benedict. Well, I need to find it first to read it. All my work is about the value of each person. And I really try to give everybody a sense of belonging. And who feels these belonging is somebody who sort of finds out that he's part of the same plan that God designed. That's why I decided to sort of choose a symbol by Matisse for the meeting point international, because I wanted everybody to focus on a red heart that seems to be the center of everything. But I mean, a little dot, something that seems like nothing, is at the center of the painting. So everybody feeling sort of sick, feeling nothing, feeling like, a non-existing creature. On the contrary, is very important. It's like a foreign matter. And Don Giussani used to call me like a little black dot, like a breath that is nothing without a sense of belonging. And so the lack of belonging makes you feel drifting away. But as Caron says, over time, these drifting leaves you a bitter taste in your mouth. But little by little, I saw others feel the same I felt. Lucy, for instance, a woman who had come back from the rebels, was treated for her traumas. But then this woman came to Kampala because she heard about me. And when she came to me, this woman had been abused, and she had been ill-treated physically, mentally, but she was able to found herself again when I told her, you are not the horror that you lived through. You have infinite value. This value comes from God, because God makes you exist. God loves you. And today this woman says, my only pain today is that I can't now kneel down in front of those I killed and ask for forgiveness. Women use dance a lot. We use dance. And when the Italian ambassador came to us, I remember that the people presented to him with a picture and of themselves and started dancing and smiling. And I did not understand, but I told the ambassador, well, you don't have to worry about us being poor and sick. Actually, we're not poor at all. We are very rich, much richer than anybody else in the world, because this photo is about our identity, an identity that we found back, and we're dancing to celebrate the fact that we found our identity again. And when I told the women about the earthquake in the US, I asked them to pray for all the displaced people who had lost their houses. I asked them to pray for the children, and they told me off, telling me, well, when you come here, you have not prayed at all. So this is, I mean, very important because all the people who are suffering in the U.S. are like us. And I thought that, on the contrary, they should have sort of listened to me, but they didn't. And then I left. And then when I went back to the valley, they told me we have organized ourselves in groups, and we're going to sort of process the stones in groups of 10 people. And the money we're going to earn, we're going to send them to the States to help the displaced people. Well, actually, it was about the tragedy, the disaster in New Orleans. But in 4 weeks, these people were able to collect $2,000. But then a person came along and this beggar came to me with a little sort of pouch and gave me some money because he wanted to give something for the starving people in New Orleans, also for starving children. So when you rediscover yourself, you become yourself. And then we invited the American ambassador to come over and collect this money. And I remember that journalists came along as well, and some people were a bit sort of shocked because usually the Americans help the Africans and not the other way around. There was a woman weighing 35 kilos, and she comes forward and says, the heart of man is international, has no color, has no race, and just moves. So the heart of man can do nothing but be touched. That's why then we decided to call this meeting point International, because we really wanted to sort of follow our hearts. And then at one point, the women said, well, our boys and girls should go to other schools and we will then come back. We want school. Let's see now a video. When you used to go out from the back door of that house, on one side there was a sort of stone ball among the weeds to drink from. I don't know for how long it had been there.
This school was wanted
This
also by the women of the meeting point. The value that the women discovered in themselves, they wanted it for their children. They wanted that the children should be educated in the way they were educated. They made the necklaces and they sold about 48,000 necklaces to Europe to contribute on the building of the school. And this is how the school came up.
at school is something nice because it makes me feel like I have somewhere where I belong.
People who wants me to be happy always, who care about my destiny, people who loves my destiny.
The way we treat our students is kind of different from the way students are treated in other schools. They don't fear us, we don't fear them.
From this school that I realized really the true meaning of work, the true meaning of teaching.
What is doing this school for these students, for me, first of all, and for everyone, is to recognizing that there is a beauty for us, that we can live this beauty. In helping each other to discover who we are.
We would really love that everyone who supports us, we don't want only support, we want that everyone, especially the friends that come here that support us, we love that they discover their value and their dignity. And we would love to be together in this discovery, in this adventure. It's a real an adventure, but a beautiful adventure, because it's a matter of looking at our bodies, all of us as a value, as a love. We are loved.
Much more grateful to come to class to teach my students with the passion, with the desire of looking at how much I'm loved, and this make me even look at them with this total love.
We use everything, music, dance from any culture, also from Italy. We climb, and we like to climb the unknown. Nobody can prevent us from doing so. We explore lakes and rivers. We try to explore and discover beauty. Beauty is the way to discover that ugliness is not what defines us. We are defined by beauty with capital B. We work with groups of people in order to make people aware of what surrounds them, and this bring about beautiful journey of discovery. And discovery generates a positive educational domino effect. Very briefly, I will tell you one more thing. Well, there are women trying to save money together, and at the end of the year, these women managed to save a lot of money, And it's great. They are a great example, and some neighbors came to learn from them. And there was a locked box, and every week, every month, they save money and they put it in this safe. And so the cashier, the secretary, women, and unfortunately the team leader, the group leader, went away and ran away with the box with the money. And the group was so sad and disappointed, and they came to us saying and crying, well, the team leader ran away with the money. And then an illiterate woman stood up and said, crying, do not come here and try to sort of confuse us. We have discovered our value. We are able to make money, and we will do our best to earn money. Because sometimes designing projects is not enough. The presence of loving people is also equally meaningful. This is what gives meaning to things, to indicators, to projects. Otherwise, such things by themselves, the projects only would simply suffocate. Well, I do think that it would be useless to add anything else to such meaningful words. I'll try to conclude by reading a sentence that I read today while visiting the exhibition on job. And I think that this is extremely helpful to better understand that what we have just heard is not just an intellectual challenge, but is much more than that. Somehow, Christianity does not solve the problem of pain and suffering, but raises the issue of suffering. And that would not be a problem if in our daily experience on this world of suffering had not enough trust in the fact that at the end of the day, reality is good and just. Today's conference has been very important because the organizers dared to start the whole week with such a topic, because our gaze is what can change our way of working, our way of connecting to our colleagues, or maybe our way to manage a hospital and move from AIDS treatments to schools, because Rose also organizes safaris. And everything that is being done in this sense can radically change what we do for our patients, our relationships, our outpatient practices, our relationships. So we need to sort of keep on this track. And I thank you very much for your attention, and I wish you a nice evening.